Was he the first slave? Maybe. But killing him made more sense. Let him go and he could come back with the rest of his tribe. Keep him alive and now you have to feed him and watch him every day. So why do it? Because one day an enemy became more useful alive than dead. But useful for what? To answer that, we have to start where the fighting stopped. The fight was over. Everyone who could run, ran, except him. And here's the part most people miss. Being captured did not automatically make him a slave. For a group that never stayed in one place, a prisoner was a terrible deal. He ate their food, slowed them down, needed a guard. And the second no one was watching, he could disappear. That's why captives didn't all meet the same fate. Some were killed, some were traded, some were brought into the group, and some were forced to work. But one prison doing a few jobs wasn't slavery yet. To keep people captive for years, the whole world around them had to change. Food had to be stored, shelters had to last, land had to be defended, and there had to be work waiting every morning. Now, one extra mouth could also mean two extra hands. For the first time, keeping an enemy alive could produce more than it cost. Before that change, every mile made him harder to keep. After it, every new task made him harder to let go. So what changed first? The captive or the world around him? To answer that, we start with the worst place to keep a prisoner. A camp that never stopped moving. Every sunrise, the shelters came down, the fire was buried, and the whole group moved again. For the captive, every move was a chance to run. For the trip, every mile made him harder to keep. But his hands were not the only thing they could use. He might know the land, where water lasted through the dry season, which valleys belonged to other groups, and which trail could get them home alive. Kill him and that knowledge disappeared with him. Keep him alive and suddenly he was more than a prisoner, he was a map. When the group reached a dry riverbed, their water was almost gone. The captive pointed beyond their reach. Nobody trusted him, but nobody had a better idea. So one guard followed, they climbed, and on the other side, water. Now, keep him alive made sense. Not safe, not kind, just useful. But once they found the water, his value could disappear. He had solved one problem, then he could become a burden again. Permanent slavery needed a different kind of value, not knowledge used one, work used every day. In a settled camp, the same jobs kept coming back. Wood to carry, food to prepare, walls to repair, stones to move. The camp no longer needed him because he knew the land. It needed him because his labor could be used tomorrow. And the day after that, that was the real turning point. A captive was no longer useful for one journey. He became useful for the future. Not every captive became a slave, but once a group learned to keep one person working, they could do it again. Then came a darker problem. One guard could watch one prisoner, but 5, 20? Ropes and spears could only do so much. To keep that many people captive, they needed a system. One that still worked, even when no one was holding the rope. And this is where the rope becomes almost the least interesting part. Different societies handle captives in different ways. But the problem was always the same. How do you control people without watching every person every second? The answer was to make escape harder than staying. A rope can hold one person, a village can hold 20. Everyone knows who belongs where. Everyone notices when someone is missing. Now put yourself in the captive's place. You wake up before sunrise. No one is holding your rope. For 1 second you could run. But where? You may not know this land. Your own people could be days away. The guards know the paths. The village knows your face. And if your family was captured too, running alone might mean leaving them behind. That is when control stops being only physical. The spear still matters. The rope still matters. But distance, fear, routine, and other people start doing part of the guarding. Now, one guard does not need to watch one prisoner every second. The whole system is watching. Then came an even darker step. The captive stopped being only someone you forced to work. In some societies, he became someone who could be owned. And once that idea existed, people could transfer him, trade him, sell him, give him to someone else. Think about how strange that is. A spear can capture a body, but a rule can decide who controls that body tomorrow. And in some systems, even a child could inherit the status of the parent. Now war was no longer the entire story. You did not need to capture every new slave yourself. The system could continue without a new battle. By the time ancient states were writing contracts, slavery was already organized enough to appear in records of sales, households, and war captives. Writing did not invent slavery. It made statutes easier to record. Who owed what, who controlled what, and sometimes who controlled whom. A clay tablet looks harmless. It is just dirt with marks on it. But for the person name on it, those marks could decide where they lived, who they worked for, and whether they were free. And yes, I know what some of you are thinking. You work 5 days. You finally get 2 days for yourself. Your boss tells you when to show up. So, are we slaves too? I get why that joke works. Most of us trade a huge part of our time for money. Sometimes the alarm goes off and freedom does not feel very free. But there is one difference we cannot blur. A normal worker can leave, change jobs, move, keep the money they earn. And legally, another person does not own them. That is not a small difference. That is the difference. Still, there is something interesting here. Humans learned very early that control becomes cheaper when you do not need force every second. Today, schedule, contracts, money, deadlines, and social pressure organize our lives. In slavery, those systems were backed by the loss of freedom itself. So the invisible rope joke works for about 5 seconds. Then history gets much darker. Because the ancient captive was not waiting for the weekend. He was waiting to find out whether he would ever be allowed to leave. So let's go back to the question that got you here. Was the man at the beginning the first slave? You will almost certainly never know. The first slave may have lived before Enion wrote his name down. Maybe he was taking a raid. Maybe his group lost a fight. Maybe he was useful for one journey, then useful for one season. Then someone simply decided not to let him go. And that may be the most important part. Slavery probably did not begin with someone standing up and saying, "We just invented slavery." It could grow from smaller decisions. Keep him alive, make him work tomorrow, do not let him leave. Do the same thing with next captive. Then build rules around it. And once those rules survive longer than the people who created them, you no longer have one prisoner, you have an institution. So the first slave may impossible to identify, but the transformation is easier to see. An enemy became a captive. A captive became a labor. Labor became a something controlled. And in some societies, that control became permanent, transferable, even hereditary. But now, there is one final problem. If war was no longer the only way to become a slave, could someone lose their freedom without losing a battle? Yes, and the answer was debt. No battle, no raid, no enemy to reap, just someone who owed more than they could pay. Imagine a bad year, the harvest fails, your food is running out, your children still need to eat, so you borrow grain from someone who has more. At first, it sounds simple, take the food now, pay it back later. But what happens if the next harvest is bad too? Now, you owe even more, and at some point, you may have nothing left to give. No extra food, no animals, no land, nothing except your own work. And this is the part I find scary. You could lose your freedom without ever losing a fight. You could walk into debt as a free person and come out of it working for someone else. In some ancient societies, debt could pull people into forced work. Sometimes for a limited time, sometimes the situation could become much worse. And sometimes families were pulled into it too. So, now look at how far we have come. The beginning of this story, we had one man on his knees after a fight. It looked like slavery began with the rope, but it didn't. The rope was only the easiest part to see. The real change happened when people learned how to make control last. First through force, then through work, then through rules, and sometimes through debt. That is why I don't think the most important question is, who was the first slave? We probably will never know his name. I think the better question is, when did humans learn that another person's freedom could have value? Because once freedom had value, someone could profit from taking it away. And after that, slavery did not need one inventor. It only needed people to keep the system going. And if you watched this far, you probably enjoyed the story. Or maybe you just really wanted to know how this all ended. Either way, thank you for watching. And if you want to help me make more stories like this, you can subscribe and leave a like. It helps more than you might think. And remember, slavery did not begin with a rope. It began when control became a system.